There exist two things in this world that I love more than perhaps anything else. The first being small, seemingly trivial trinkets that, while insignificant on the surface, are actually material representations of some grander story, tradition, or idea, and the second being dragons. I've always been fascinated by this concept of an innocuous novelty being completely meaningless to one person and of great significance to another. This idea that disposable knickknacks are not entirely devoid of value, but are instead entry points into stories and ways of life previously unknown to you. Obviously, not all toys, or whatever you want to call them, serve as symbols of some broader concept, but when applicable, it's a rather compelling means of storytelling, in my opinion. Take this bobblehead of a piece of celery that I got from a Buffalo Bison's AAA baseball game a couple of years ago as an example. For you, it's probably more confusing than it is anything else. Why is he holding a bobblehead of a C-tier vegetable? But people from my hometown of Buffalo, New York will recognize this character as a now retired contestant from the cherished WCC race, which used to be a race that the Bisons would put on every day, in which three people would wear celery, blue cheese, and chicken wing costumes and race around the ballpark. This event, of course, took shape as a celebration of sorts of Buffalo's historical association with the chicken wing, its enduring reverence of the finger food, and its outspoken preference of blue cheese as a condiment over ranch. And Celery herself was the race's breakout star, a beloved underdog who did not win a single race until her 2017 retirement match, which drew a crowd of over 16,000 people. This bobblehead thus is not only a strange desk topper, but is instead a symbol of a local sporting institution and more broadly the things that still connect Buffalo to the mainstream. It exists both as a self-contained toy and as a representation of Buffalo's history, a token of the things that embody the city on a national scale. And given my love of both this concept and, again, dragons, you may not be shocked to learn that I keep this bad boy on my desk. To the average person, this may look no different than the median cheap toy that you'd find in a McDonald's Happy Meal, and that's because it is a cheap toy that you'd find in a McDonald's Happy Meal. These bad boys were available at the chain throughout 1998 and haven't done much in the way of holding their inherently minimal value. I believe I purchased two of them on eBay a couple years ago for a whopping total of $7. But as true ball knowers may have already gleaned, this dragon, while itself nothing precious, is a physical symbol of a piece of Disney lore that has become the stuff of legend, one of just a scant few material manifestations of a Walt Disney Imagineering concept that otherwise failed to make it off the drawing board. This dragon, which you again can purchase on the internet for less than the price of a bottle of water at a Disney park, is a tangible representation and, to my knowledge, the only obtainable embodiment of one of the biggest what-ifs in the history of the Walt Disney Company. Disney generally likes to keep its abandoned concepts under wraps, and knowing that, it's astonishing that this piece of official merchandise for a land that never was not only exists, but can be purchased online for less than this dude wants for a single Dorito. This dragon serves as an entry point into a story about theme park design, the whims of corporate executives, and the harsh realities of the themed entertainment industry. What I feel is an initially bleak but ultimately gratifying tale about artistry and how ideas can die in one form before later blossoming into several others. This aesthetically unappealing, generally very articulated dragon is simultaneously a boring children's toy and one of our lone palpable symbols of what is one of the most layered and, in my opinion, fascinating stories in the history of Walt Disney Imagineering. The story of Beastly Kingdom. It's 1989, and congratulations, you're Michael Eisner. You've been CEO of the Walt Disney Company for the last half a decade, and throughout that time, you've made a concerted effort to amplify your company's theme park division, an endeavor you plan to kick into overdrive in the coming years. And you're sitting around thinking of ways to bolster the old portfolio when you come to the shrewd realization that the only thing that people love more than Mickey Mouse are actual mice.
Eisner had this idea, we want to do something about animals, and I went into this meeting with him, a meeting which lasted about 5 minutes, in which he's like, people like animals, people like Disney. If Disney did something with animals, people would like that. And there was one other statement which was, you know, we've got the Magic Kingdom, we should have the Animal Kingdom. Like, that's a sentence.
You just keep thinking about a theme park based on animals, so you task your business division with conducting a study on the economics of such an enterprise, a quasi-zoo that was distinctly Disney and of the level of quality that people had come to expect of your brand. And the suits return sometime later with a 400-page document that essentially says, no.
They basically said, don't do this. This is a bad idea. A million reasons why, you don't want to build another zoo.
So you turn around and you hand that document to Imagineer Joe Rohde, a then relatively young Disney employee who at the time had recently spearheaded the construction of the Adventurers Club at Pleasure Island, and tell him, okay, we're building an animal-based theme park, here's what not to do.
But they did us the great favor of presenting us with this giant 400-page document, which basically described, okay, if you don't do this, then you might be able to do something.
Armed with a tome laying out potential pitfalls to avoid, Rohde and his team commenced work on what would become, in my opinion, the crown jewel of Walt Disney World's offerings, a theme park that is as effective in execution of a clear artistic vision as the medium has to offer. The park centers around a very clear set of themes that are conveyed in various ways, both visually and narratively, throughout its 580-acre footprint, with these themes being the intrinsic value of nature, the psychological value of adventure, a personal call to action, and perhaps the most obvious, a universal love of and fascination with animals.
One way or another, whether it's a live animal, an imaginary animal, a prehistoric animal, a storybook animal, one way or another, there's a form of the animal world that brings people emotionally alive and that we can use to bring them into contact with this idea.
And Imagineering chose to convey this preeminent theme by placing guests in quasi-natural environments in which they could interact with animals of all sorts, whether real, extinct, or fictional. To go back to Rohde's quote, the team working on the park felt that animals inherently sparked some form of emotional reaction out of all individuals, and they wanted to provide for people the opportunity to interact with as many forms of the animal world as possible. This led Imagineering to design experiences around 3 types of animals: existing wild animals, real animals you can't see, and animals who never existed. Unfortunate update, my camera has just died, much like the plans for Beastly Kingdom, which we are still going to discuss because we persevere. But I gotta pull out the laptop now, so apologies for sudden glare off classes. So existing wild animals were perhaps the paramount form of the animal world with which guests needed to be able to interact with given Eisner's original goal, and they were worked into the park at essentially every turn in the form of sprawling exhibits at which guests could just pause and watch various species of animals just chill and do their thing. The Kilimanjaro Safaris attraction would serve as another means through which visitors could interact with existing animals, as the guided trek would place you in as close proximity to animals like lions, cheetahs, and crocodiles as a respectable company would allow you to get. Sometimes your truck would even get stopped because a giraffe won't get out of the road, and while this is initially annoying, you can't help but laugh, because when else are you ever going to get stopped by a giraffe in the road? Real animals you can't see were to manifest on the Countdown to Extinction e-ticket, and more broadly throughout Dinoland USA. This land in particular was of special interest to Eisner, with Melody Malmberg's The Making of Disney's Animal Kingdom theme park book revealing that it was the executive who pushed for Dinoland to get a more exciting marquee attraction. And so it appears. This is a great book if you can find it. I got it on Thrift Books. Michael Eisner is quoted in this book as saying, "You've got to lead with your cliches. I want a Dinoland, and I want it to be called Dinoland." And this, of course, brings us to the third subset of animals outlined as part of the park's core mission, those who never existed. In initial plans, these imaginary creatures of myth and legend were to reside in Beastly Kingdom, a fantastical setting featuring winding hedge mazes, moldering castles, and yes, dragons. And it's hard to put into words just how integral this land was to the initial Animal Kingdom concept, as it single-handedly supported one of the park's pillar ideas. This isn't to say that Imagineering viewed the park's other lands as afterthoughts, far from it, but from looking at early concepts, it looks as though Beastly Kingdom was a land of particular pride for Imagineering, an ambitious endeavor that would have featured immaculate theming, innovative attractions, and yes, dragons. One of the things that I love most about Animal Kingdom is that it feels grounded, or at least as grounded as a theme park can feel. There's this feeling of verisimilitude as you work through the park, as though you're visiting and experiencing a different part of the world as opposed to an artificial construction. Whereas the pavilions throughout Epcot's World Showcase, for example, feel like idealizations of other parts of the world and superficial encapsulations of what Western audiences know about these places, Animal Kingdom's lands feel like slices of life, like breathing, lived-in settings in which authenticity trumps stereotype. And going off of this idea, if we think of the Africa and Asia sections of Animal Kingdom as the park's take on World Showcase pavilions, think of Beastly Kingdom as its rendition of Fantasyland, a somewhat subversive take on a subject matter intrinsically linked with Disney parks. Penciled in for Animal Kingdom's southwest corner, the land would have been divided into two subsections, or realms, with these areas, according to Rhodey, further divided into nice, beautiful, and dangerous areas. The good realm would celebrate fairy tale elements generally regarded as pure while embracing the beauty inherently possible in fantastical settings, while the evil realm would have been a darker, more ambitious area, housing components broadly considered. It's in the name. At the center of the land would have been a topiary castle that would serve as the backdrop of the Quest for the Unicorn walkthrough attraction, an experience in which guests, and you may want to sit down for this, would go on a quest for a unicorn. Animal Kingdom was, and in many ways remains, a park predicated on the idea of taking a step back and just immersing yourself in your surroundings, with the ability to just slow down and watch wildlife exist around you, playing an integral role in this psychological escape. And the park provides you with several opportunities to do this in each of its lands via walking trails on which you can encounter a form of the animal world. You can see gorillas on the aptly named Gorilla Falls Exploration Trail in Africa, tigers on the Maharaja Jungle Trek in Asia, fake, dinosaurs on the Cretaceous Trail in Dinoland, etc., etc. Quest for the Unicorn was, in many ways, set to be Beastly Kingdom's take on such an experience. Guests would traverse through a hedge maze in which they would encounter various mythical creatures, the labyrinth culminating in an encounter with a unicorn animatronic in a mystical, secluded grotto. The other attraction in the good realm would have been Fantasia Gardens, a family boat ride inspired by the Pastoral Symphony and Dance of the Hour scenes of Fantasia. This attraction would have been fantasy actualized. You would have sailed past Greek-inspired architecture and a likely stylized recreation of Mount Olympus while encountering mythical creatures like Pegasus or Pegasi, centaurs, and yes, even hippos. I know musical boat ride doesn't get the people going quite like a high-speed e-ticket, but this attraction on paper had the ingredients of a Disney Parks classic. I mean, this was a concept that had very clear It's a Small World influence, and while I'm not going to say that it could have been as resonant as its predecessor, it could have matched its impact in terms of Disney Parks hippos. But now we move over to the evil realm, which is the section of Beastly Kingdom that has become the most fabled over time on the back of its ambition and impact on the general themed entertainment industry. This realm, per Rhodey, would have taken guests through the Jabberwock Woods, what'd you call me? And to a foreboding setting that was visually the land's most imposing area. A section demonstrably inspired by medieval Europe, but stylized as to still feel fantastical. Located in this evil area would have been a Loch Ness Monster-themed waterfront restaurant, which would have featured occasional visits from Nessie herself, because nothing is more evil than Scotland. And this eatery would have sat in the shadow of a grand castle showing signs of dilapidation, an ominous and visually striking structure that would have served as the weenie of the entire land. This icon is why I refer to Beastly Kingdom as a whole as a subversive take on ideas generally associated with Disney parks. When you think of a Disney park, you think of a castle, whether that be Cinderella's castle, Sleeping Beauty castle en français, the list goes on. But as is brought up by Jim Korkis in this 2017 article for All Ears, Beastly Kingdom would have had its own castle. It just would have been scorched and home to what was supposed to be the most ambitious and frightening audio animatronic Imagineering had ever conceived. Partially housed inside this castle would have been the Dragon's Tower attraction, an inverted roller coaster that at several points of development was viewed as Animal Kingdom's premier e-ticket. Accompanied by a cauldron of kleptomaniacal bats, guests would have embarked on a high-speed journey through this castle to help their winged friends steal some of the gold housed deep within the structure. The only issue is that the gold is protected by a menacing dragon, a fire-breathing beast who is evidently concerned about inflation. The ride's climax would have been a close encounter with a 30-foot-tall dragon audio animatronic that, in a park with no shortage of memorable images, would have certainly been one of its most awe-inspiring. So you can see why I state that Beastly Kingdom comes off as an area that Imagineers took particular pride in. It had the ingredients of a land that would have been incredibly distinct, not only within Animal Kingdom, but within Walt Disney World as a whole, while still being approachable and innovative enough to potentially stand the test of time. So why didn't it come to fruition? Well, what if I told you that it did? Then I'd be lying. Kind of. It's complicated, we'll get into it. As Animal Kingdom inched closer to reality, it became clear that the company had underestimated the costs associated with maintaining an enterprise housing real animals.
About $1 billion to build this park, right?
Give or take a few $100 million.
It was already running significantly over budget, and given that Euro Disney at the time was an unequivocal flop, there really wasn't any extra money to throw around to construct Animal Kingdom exactly as it appeared on the page. Budget cuts and reallocation per Corcus in the aforementioned All Ears article prompted Disney to cut roughly 75 acres from the Africa section of Animal Kingdom, and the company was also forced to choose between Beastly Kingdom and Dinoland USA as an opening day land. And who had the final say on this matter? Well, if it isn't Mr. I want a Dinoland and I want it to be called Dinoland himself, Michael Eisner. There are countless articles and videos documenting the development of Beastly Kingdom, and a lot of them deduce that Eisner chose Dinoland over Beastly Kingdom because Disney at the time was developing a movie based on the ever-marketable creatures, which would obviously become 2000's Dinosaur. And while I don't dispute this notion entirely, I don't know if it's as cynical as that. I think it's clear that Eisner just had a soft spot for a dinosaur-themed land. He was the one who pushed for a more exciting attraction in the area. He was the one who wanted said e-ticket to feature believable animatronics. Hell, he was the one who came up with the land's name. An impending movie featuring the land's subject matter certainly didn't hurt its case, but I think given its more cost-effective price tag and Eisner's infatuation with the concept, that Beastly Kingdom was just always fighting a losing battle. Constructed in Beastly Kingdom's place was Camp Mini Mickey, a makeshift intellectual property heavy area where guests could meet Disney characters and watch shows inspired by Pocahontas and The Lion King. This temporary construction only took up a small portion of the acreage earmarked for Beastly Kingdom and was designed with the assumption that the larger, more ambitious land would ultimately be built, with Camp Mini Mickey in this scenario either being swallowed by Beastly Kingdom or serving as a natural bridge. And building off this point, Beastly Kingdom still seemed like a sure thing even after Animal Kingdom commenced operations, a certainty that would manifest once Disney found some spare change in the couch. The concept wasn't abandoned by any means, merely moved to the back burner to be revisited sometime after the completion of the park's Asia section in 1999. And going back to this book, which is again an official Disney publication, Beastly Kingdom is referenced several times throughout, with Malmberg even writing about Beastly Kingdom. While not included in today's park, it could well be part of tomorrow's. And if this quote isn't clear enough indication to you of just how close Beastly Kingdom came to reality, you don't have to look any further than Animal Kingdom itself. There are still traces of Beastly Kingdom everywhere you look at the park. There's a massive dragon head in the park's entry area. There's a section of the Animal Kingdom parking lot still named Unicorn. Hell, there is still a dragon in the middle of the park's logo. And Animal Kingdom contained physical elements of the land and visual indicators to suggest its imminent construction around the time of its 1998 opening. There were several references to Beastly Kingdom throughout the short-lived Discovery Riverboats attraction, including a unicorn statue that may or may not have survived park previews, a rock formation in the shape of a dragon, and a cave in which a fire-breathing dragon purportedly resided. This last Easter egg was to serve as a teaser of sorts for the then forthcoming Dragon Tower attraction, with Imagineering even wanting to place a small-scale animatronic representative of the larger, more ambitious dragon that guests would encounter on Dragon Tower near the cave. But this idea too was scrapped, with Dinoland USA #1 fan Michael Eisner instead opting to construct a large-scale Iguanodon animatronic. And Disney's initial messaging and marketing regarding Animal Kingdom heavily leaned on the assumption that a fantastical land was still a certainty. Eisner referenced imaginary animals, specifically dragons, during his Animal Kingdom dedication speech, with the creatures even being included in promotional materials such as commercials and Happy Meals. McDonald's, in association with Disney, produced toys representing 12 animals that guests could expect to encounter at Animal Kingdom and included them in Happy Meals around the time of the park's opening. I'm not sure if this dragon is meant to represent the one that was set to appear at the end of Dragon Tower or the one that was designed for the Discovery Riverboats, but regardless, they're kind of the same thing and the same idea is conveyed. Beastly Kingdom was viewed as a strong enough certainty within the walls of Disney to not only include elements of it throughout the park, but to release official, albeit tangential, merchandise to promote it. And then it never happened. There isn't really one specific development or occurrence that served as the death knell for Beastly Kingdom. People often like to bring up the similarities between the proposed Dragon Tower attraction and the Dueling Dragons roller coaster that opened as part of Universal's Islands of Adventure in 1999 as a smoking gun, but this to me has always come off as more coincidental than anything else. It's become a bit of a theme park legend that Imagineers who worked on Beastly Kingdom left Disney and joined Universal Creative, where they would repurpose the idea of a high high-speed dragon-themed roller coaster and transform it into one of the competition's marquee offerings. And this theory isn't without credence. I mean, there were inevitably some former Imagineers who worked on Islands of Adventure, and there are admittedly some similarities between the two concepts. The overarching dragon motif, the castle queue, the inverted roller coaster ride technology, so on and so forth. However, I've always viewed this as more so retrospectively connecting dots that don't necessarily have any tangible thread between them. It kind of comes off as speculation that decades of parroted internet discourse has mistakenly painted as fact. I don't think this was a deliberate act of theft, as the similarities are largely superficial. Sure, there's overlap between the design motifs and ride technologies, but their central draws are entirely different. Dragon Tower, while thrilling, was to focus on story and culminate in an interaction with the most ambitious animatronic Disney had ever constructed, while Dueling Dragons' thrill stemmed from the novelty of having two tracks running simultaneously and the resulting close encounters with other guests. Similar subject matters and aesthetics, to me, are not enough to claim plagiarism or theft when the intent is so disparate. It'd be like saying that Monsters Unchained is a ripoff of Carousel of Progress because they both feature the Wolfman. Okay, that's a little obtuse, but you know what I'm saying. And while the cursory similarities between Dragon Tower and Dueling Dragons may have played a role in Imagineering's decision to ultimately shelve the Beastly Kingdom concept, I think time was the more significant factor. Animal Kingdom prompted greater attendance dips at the Walt Disney World's other theme parks than anticipated, meaning that funds earmarked for future attractions at the resort's fourth gate had to be dispersed among the other parks. By the time Disney had the ambition and budget necessary to add to Animal Kingdom, Imagineering had come up with other concepts that it found more attractive and auspicious than the then aging Beastly Kingdom concept. It's like when you go to the store for eggs and you get there and you buy milk and cereal and yogurt and ice cream and a bunch of other stuff, and then you get home and you realize that you forgot eggs. And while I obviously would have loved to have seen Beastly Kingdom materialize in its intended form, its remnants can still be found physically throughout Animal Kingdom and felt spiritually on many of the park's attractions. In fact, I dare say that we are in a better position now than we would have been had Beastly Kingdom been constructed as conceived. I could make an argument that had Beastly Kingdom been constructed, we wouldn't have gotten Expedition Everest, the Legend of the Forbidden Mountain, which of course is a roller coaster that opened in the Asia section of Animal Kingdom in 2006. Now, I'm not saying that two roller coasters couldn't have coexisted in the same park. They very obviously could have, but there is some remarkable narrative overlap between Dragon Tower and Expedition Everest. On Dragon Tower, you would have embarked on a high-speed trek through a structure you're not supposed to be in, with nature admonishing you by placing you in close contact with a mythical beast in the form of the largest and most ambitious animatronic that Disney had ever built. In Expedition Everest, you embark on a high-speed trek through a structure you're not supposed to be in, with nature admonishing you by placing you in close contact with a mythical beast in the form of the largest and most ambitious audio animatronic that Disney has ever built. You get what I'm saying. Expedition Everest took inspiration from several abandoned Animal Kingdom attraction concepts, with its Dragon Tower influence being evident. If Dragon Tower itself existed, it would have been difficult to envision Disney constructing another narratively similar roller coaster on the other side of the park less than 10 years later. And that would have been a travesty, because Expedition Everest is my favorite theme park attraction of all time. And dragons, albeit in a tangential form, would ultimately fly into Animal Kingdom on the very land once reserved for Beastly Kingdom. Disney licensed the theme park rights to James Cameron's Avatar in 2011, with its first experience based on the highest grossing film in the history of cinema penciled in for Animal Kingdom. Said experience, Pandora: The World of Avatar, would open in 2017, finally giving the park an entire land based on fictional wildlife and nature. Flight of Passage, the land's innovative e-ticket that could perhaps best be described as Soarin' with Smurfs, places you on the back of a breathing Ikron for a memorable trip through the breathtaking skies of Pandora, with these creatures taking obvious visual inspiration from what we on Not Pandora refer to as dragons. And Pandora, to me, is a recent themed entertainment triumph, perhaps my favorite themed setting in the world. The floating mountains, the otherworldly flora, the green beer, all of it is just so alien and uncanny in the best possible way, and I'm not certain that we would have got it in the form in which we got it had Beastly Kingdom existed in the first place. And new ashes of Beastly Kingdom continue to surface now, nearly 30 years later. The Walt Disney World Resort is set to finally receive its first inverted roller coaster in the coming years when the Monsters Inc. Door roller coaster opens at Disney's Hollywood Studios. And back at Animal Kingdom, a new Maya-inspired Tropical America section is slated to open in 2027. The land's planned Indiana Jones attraction is confirmed to feature a mythical creature within its narrative. And while I'm very much putting on my speculation cap here, feathered serpents are incredibly prominent figures within Mesoamerican myths. These creatures, which often look akin to what we know as dragons, were deified across many Mesoamerican cultures and religions, with the Maya having their own in the form of Kukulkan. This is again obviously just speculation, but I don't think it's asinine to suggest that this eventual Indiana Jones attraction will culminate in an encounter with a dragon-like creature, much in the way that Dragon Tower once intended. And what is this indie ride and the eventual Tropical America section of Animal Kingdom set to replace? Dino Land USA. Checkmate, Eisner. So that's the story of this small plastic purple dragon, a symbol of an Animal Kingdom land that both was and wasn't, and an entry point into a Disney parks epic that is still unfolding today. Beastly Kingdom has always been my favorite abandoned Imagineering concept because it's A, at my favorite park, and B, just so tangible. I mean, it was so close to coming to fruition that I can keep a piece of it on my desk, and yet it never materialized. And given the Walt Disney Company's contemporary subservience, if you want to call it that, to intellectual properties with basically everything it does at its theme parks, I'm not sure if we will ever see an original concept on the scale of Beastly Kingdom ever again. But it's endlessly fascinating to see how the concept is still influencing new ideas now, even 3 decades later. So next time you walk through Pandora, ride Expedition Everest, or even park in the unicorn lot at Disney's Animal Kingdom, make sure to think about Beastly Kingdom, because what you're experiencing literally would not be possible without it. I certainly know I will. And then I'll look in the mirror and realize that I made a, however long this video is, video about a Happy Meal toy. And I'll wonder where it all went wrong. Thank you for watching.